Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Max Schiller, and I'm a senior concept artist working in the movies and games industry for about, I think, 6 or 7 years now. And I'm super excited to have you all here with me. This is going to be a first recording myself and making a voice over it, so I'm going to make it as casual as I can. There is no real pre-planning in what I'm going to say. I'll just have the video up here and watch it and just talk over it. I have a background as a teacher at New Edge School, where I'm teaching for about 5 years now. Every year I'm there for 2 weeks to showcase my process of designing and working in 3D with Blender. But recently I had the opportunity to also give a VR course because VR is a very essential part in my process. And I was just excited to see the excitement of my students with VR. It felt like they connected with the technique and the software, and I wanted to share it with all of you and give an insight of how it can be used. So I started the recording, and this is going to be super raw as well. I had this rough idea. Let's talk about the concept itself. I had this rough idea about a big tree with some eyes on it. A little bit of fantasy, dark fantasy. I've played Dark Souls and Elden Ring, and that kind of vibe was in my head. And whenever I have a client, a new project that I'm starting, I'm doing these kind of mind board, these notes, right? I'm writing down ideas. It branches, excuse me. It branches out into new ideas, and it just evolves into a whole story, into something that gets me excited, with clients that gets the client excited. And I'm doing all these three things simultaneously, looking for references, writing down stuff, and sketching. And as you can see right now, it's really just a thumbnail size where I just bring in ideas from my head, which serve maybe as a base for the 3D. Maybe I'll just take parts of it later. I'm not sure yet. I'll just try out stuff, and some of those sketches are going to be slightly more detailed than others. For example, the second one, I very quickly realized that I don't like this kind of composition, this big tree with guy in the foreground on a platform, looking over the vista and seeing that big tree. I felt like it was too far away, not personal enough, and I wanted to have a very personal story. I wanted to have this kid going to this godly, all-seeing tree, but it doesn't look very good, right? And divine, it looks more evilish, and that's the idea behind the whole picture, right? That we have this kid, Hope. He goes to the tree to get to know the future of its parents, and this entity he's going to, which symbolizes fate and destiny, isn't what he thought it is. It isn't nice. It isn't welcoming. It's frightening, right? The future is frightening. You don't necessarily know what is going to happen. You have to comply with what the future holds for you. So that's the idea behind the image itself. It should feel creepy. And I really liked number 1, number 3, and number 4 for now. Snippets of those, and I'm going to combine all of those later in 3D. And while I'm sketching and painting, I'm just evolving ideas, and I'm just trying to it's like writing down ideas, but in a sketchy way. I don't care if it looks good. I don't care even if somebody besides myself is looking at it and is going to understand what I'm doing. It's more like my own notebook, my own ideas that I have to read, nobody else. And for clients, for example, then once I feel like one idea is good enough, I'm going to polish it to a degree that it is going to be understandable for the clients or for the art director or for whoever is with me on the project. But in this case, it's purely for me, right? So it's staying in some ways very sketchy. And once I feel like the idea is down, I can stop and jump to the next idea, to the next sketch. And yeah, as you can see here, I jumped over to color just to keep it fresh to me, to have another way of describing what is in my head, and to keep it interesting for me, because I want to enjoy the process the whole time. And when I feel I don't get new ideas from just sketching, I jump into another idea generation process, like photo bashing in this case, or the other one like value sketching. And it's all about the ideas. It's about finding something fresh, something new, something that excites you. I think that's the most important thing for me, at least. Always to be excited about the process, because if you are excited about something, you can share that excitement with everybody else, and they feel your honest, excitement about the idea, and maybe jump on board, or at least are motivated to share their thoughts to help you make that idea better and to evolve it. And the good thing also about being able to use different techniques is, in this case, I have sketches where I feel like the design is cool with the line work, and then we have those value and color script sketches, which give me an idea of the mood of how the scene looks in terms of color. And you can see, I'll just copy and paste stuff. I'll make a few notes there. So it's still very evolving, the idea. But we already are a little bit more solid in, or I'm more solid in the idea of what I want to have, what I want to create. And you see, most of the time I'm working in sequences, because I feel like that's good to describe a story. To have like an establishment of this scenery, then maybe a little bit more of a closer shot, but still establishing everything, and then a more mid-shot level where we can see a character. And it doesn't need to be, don't need to create everything, but still those sketches can be shown to somebody and they will feel more involved and more like it's a story and not just an image. And once I'm done with everything, I did this quick asset list that I've created by looking at my sketches to know what I'm going to create in VR later, or at least after this break. So you can see I have this this alarm, or this watch, just to check my time. And we are like 1.5 hours in, a good 1.5 hours. And now we jump into VR. And yeah, let me just grab a sip of water. So VR takes a little bit of time to set up. Sometimes the connection isn't working, but I rarely had the occasion that I cannot start VR. In this case, and in most cases, I'm using Adobe Substance 3D Modeler, which is a paid service from Adobe inside the Substance Painter suite. And I have to say, I love that app, but it's super expensive if you just want to use that VR stuff. If you want to use the other Substance Painter software tools, then I think it's justifiable. Still super expensive. I think it's 50 euros per month. And there's also a free version of the former software before it was coded new into Substance Painter, a Substance Modeler, which is called Adobe Medium, which is free on the Oculus Store. And I would really recommend to try out Adobe Medium, because you can do like 90% of everything I'm doing here right now in Medium. It's just not as stable. It's just a little bit less streamlined. So it's not as comfortable, let's say it like that. But it's still super powerful. And the whole VR workflow is 100% doable in Medium as well. This is just more quality of life using this one. So what I'm doing is, I have my asset list, right? Whenever I look to the left and there's nothing, there's a separate screen in VR where I have my reference open. It's just not recording it. So I check my references that I've gathered in my ideation process, and I'm building the assets. I'm always starting with a hero asset, and you've seen in the beginning I've created a very basic primitive form, and I'm just cutting out stuff, I'm adding stuff, and essentially created at the beginning a primary level of detail in terms of very basic shape. And then right now I'm going more detailed into it, breaking stuff up, creating a second layer of detail, making it a little bit more sophisticated, and breaking up stuff. As you can see, it's a little bit more like a ruin, so we have all those broken up edges, which always make it interesting. And the idea is, I have this basic shape, right, which I've created at the first level of detail, and then I'm making it more interesting, less basic in this level of creation, but I keep the overall shape. So it's not like I'm changing big things. No, I'm keeping what I've created in the beginning and just evolving and detailing it more. And this is how I sculpt and build everything, right? We have a basic form that I'm creating, the shape design. Then I jump into the second phase where I make it a little bit more interesting, breaking up the silhouette, making it a little bit more exciting to look at. And then the third level of detail normally is surface level detail. So to make the surface look, I don't know, like stony, right, rough, stuff like that. And most of the time I'm going to accomplish that with textures, which I'm going to apply later in Blender. But for now, this is still a second level of detail. And the cool thing about VR, I mean, you can say that about every 3D software, right? But once you've created a few detailed parts, I can just take them, reuse them, change them on the fly. And this way, I organically, while building an asset, create a kit bash set of which I can build more assets for my scene. And the benefit of that is that it all feels like it's belonging together, because it all starts out from the same base, right? I'm using the same stuff all over again. So this design language doesn't change that much, and it all feels like it's from the same universe. And I love this process because this is not only designing, like every crack, every thing that I'm sculpting in essentially has some kind of history. It tells the story of your concept. Just making everything a little bit more destroyed, like giving all those cracks, gives me the opportunity to explore the story in my head further, to be more excited about it. And also I can very personally give that asset a history that feels in line with the concept that I'm creating. If I compare that to, for example, buying kit bash sets online, I feel like they can look cool. Most of the time they're even built by people who are way more talented in modeling or sculpting than I am. But most of the time they just feel soulless, for me at least, because they aren't created specifically for the project that I'm working on right now. So by having the ability to just create my own kit bash set, I'm just able to to make it more personal, to make it more like my style of art, if that makes sense. Okay, you see, like now VR isn't working, so I had to restart the headset and stuff like that. Nice, now it's working again. And now just about detailing. That's a very meditative process for me. I just realized, because I sped up everything quite a lot, I get very dizzy watching it, at least the VR part. So I'll definitely learn from that and find another way next time. But for now, we have to go through that. A few technical things. This software is using voxels. Voxels are like pixels. You can see the grid right now here, 3D pixels. And the cool thing about voxels is you can just cut into it like into clay. Like if you know what a boolean is, a boolean in ZBrush or Blender is essentially doing the same, but it's quite hard to make a boolean with a high poly model. You need to stay very low poly to make clean cuts. In voxel, there is not such a it's not that difficult. You can just cut stuff in, out, and I love that because it feels way more creative to me. The downside is, most of the time, if you aren't high resolution enough with your models, everything is going to feel very like not sharp enough. You have always like a little bit of bevel or very round edges, and the details aren't there. So you have to turn on the detail level very high, and this can be very difficult if you have like a low tier PC that isn't very powerful enough. I'm working with a very strong power station or workstation. I have two 3090s, so I think I have enough stuff. But I think, at least for VR, for this software, for modeler, your PC is the limit. The software itself is super stable. I've heard somebody tell me that you can use modeler with a poly count of over 1 billion polygons. It's crazy. The only downside is, or at least I don't know where, I can see how many polys my VR scene has. So once I'm exporting it and bringing it to Blender, then I realize, damn, this is way too much, like 100 million polygons. So I'm always trying to look, when I save, at the file in my Explorer. And if the file size is over 1 gigabyte, then I know, okay, that's roughly enough resolution. I'd either bring the resolution down in my VR file, or I'll start a new file and create a few more assets in a fresh one. Because otherwise it's getting very unstable to import all those assets to Blender and to decimate them in one go. Yeah, and as you can see, I have I'm creating one shape, one primitive, and then I'm cutting it into different meshes, and I individually cut into them and make them more interesting. And this way I can size up the resolution of every individual mesh and get the resolution necessary to have a good level of detail. And I think that's something that I, at the beginning of my VR journey, did wrong. I created just one layer and just made this mesh as one solid mesh. And therefore, if I wanted to have more detail, I had to raise up the resolution of the whole layer of this whole scene, and it was never stable. It always crashed my scenery. And nowadays I understand that I need to separate every mesh and work on every mesh independently, which gives also the benefit of being able to change the position and change or sculpt over it or reposition anything in Blender later, which is always good. Because in Blender, when we set our camera, we might find that, for example, this eye is in the wrong place. And if it would be just one solid mesh, the tree of the eyes, you can't change anything. But because everything is separate, it's super easy to just to make adjustments. And I feel like it's always good to have as much freedom as you can as an artist, instead of being restricted by the software or by technical restrictions. I'd love to have the freedom to do whatever I like, to be spontaneous, right? To change my mind. And that's why I love VR, for example. Because VR, for me, like, I started using VR before even using any other 3D software. VR was always VR was my gate into 3D concept art. Before that, I was just painting and sketching. I still am a big fan of Feng Zhu. But I was very, very bad. But yeah, and didn't get a job in anything. But then I saw VR. I think at the first VR session I saw was by Finian McManus, and I was inspired. I was like, damn, this is what I need. I need to be able to have an output of my ideas without thinking about technical stuff like perspective, right? And the benefit also in VR is you have this immense feeling of scale. You know how you can make the scene big enough so you are standing there as if you would be there in real life, and this is super beneficial. To just live your creation, and it kept me excited. Okay, so now you can see I'm done with VR. I've sculpted all my assets. I'm importing them to Blender, and I'm using 2 Blender files most of the time. So one Blender file is my asset Blender, where I'm going to import all the assets I've created, adjust them, adjust the scale, decimate them, because as you can see at the right bottom corner, it's like nearly 70 million polygons in the scene. So I need to decimate this stuff to make it more responsive when I'm creating my scene. So decimating, and also I'm texturing them at least a little bit in this file. And once I'm done with all those basic things, I'm creating a new file, the scene, the concept scene essentially, and I'm importing all those assets into the scenery. And there I build my real concept, right? There I make the adjustments that I need, like maybe modifying the asset to follow the vision that I had. But this is super boring stuff. This is like the most boring thing of all. You have to type in some numbers. I feel my rule of thumb is every asset should be around 1 million polygons. This way my PC or my Blender scene stays very solid, but I keep the detail of all those assets. Because if you decimate stuff, Blender is going to compute and tries to get rid of a lot of polygons, which makes the mesh lighter. But if you overdo it, we lose the detail because it's just making it, it's just creating that, or it's, how should I say? Damn it, the word is missing. Let me drink a sip of water. Okay, now I got the word. It's simplifying the mesh too much, and we lose the detail. So we need to find a sweet spot. My sweet spot is around 1 million polygons, but depending on how big the asset is going to be in the scene, how present it is, how close it is to the camera, I'm changing that number. So sometimes it's even bigger if it's more in the foreground, or if it's just background stuff, then I'm simplifying it even more. Also a cool thing, a cool side effect about building your own kit bash set, you have your own kit bash set created. So you can totally reuse those assets for another idea. It doesn't need to even be in the same universe, right? If I'm going to make an illustration of a Roman soldier, maybe, fighting the Greek gods, whatever. Like there's a clash between Roman Empire and the Greeks, maybe. Because they called, they renamed the gods. That could be reused, or that could be a good starting point to have those assets and to reuse them. Or if you want to stay in the same universe, you can still use those assets. You can use them to create new assets, right? So you have a starting point to maybe this pillar, for example. You can just break this up even more and have like a little bit of variations there. So that's a big benefit compared to just using 2D, for example, or buying a kit bash set. Because buying a kit bash set, most of the time, you, at least, like, because I'm a professional and I know the industry and I know the marketplaces, most of the time I can see if something was bought and just put into the scene and not very much modified. And this way I can see that, well, this guy clearly has talent in building that scene and having an eye for maybe colors, for light, but I cannot see the design skills because all that he's using are assets from somebody else who designed those. And I feel like if you create your own assets, you can show your design skills. You have to do sketches, you have to create that world, you have to create assets that belong to that world. It feels way more unique, and I think that's a better way as a concept artist, as a designer, to show potential clients that you are able to work on their piece, on the new stuff. Yeah. So what am I doing here, right? I'm changing the size of the floor tiles. I'm creating a few collections to have everything in order. I'm changing the pivot points here. Yeah, just all quality of life steps. So I have a very streamlined process later on in assembling my scenery. Yeah, and I need order because I'm German. I need my order. Cool. Okay, like decimating stuff a little bit more. I think we are close to jumping into the texturing process. Yeah. Texturing is also a very, very interesting process. I feel textures, at least for me, are super important. Like light and texture are the most important things for me to have a successful concept piece. Of course, the design, the idea, the uniqueness, everything of this is super important. But if you want to have like just an image that is functioning in 3D, light and texture is super important. Light can be super boring. If you don't know how to light stuff, then it can feel super flat, right? Or just wrong. With texturing, it's the same. Textures can be like not well placed. They can be like not sharp enough. You can see the tiling. If you don't know what you do, texturing can break your image. So I tried to learn a great deal of texturing doing my Blender process. And now I try to learn Unreal as well. And it's so different. And it's like the most difficult part for me to just learn texturing in Unreal. But I feel like slowly I get to a point in Unreal where I feel like, okay, I can cheat the same materials that I'm doing also in Blender, that I can have the same creative freedom, and therefore I'm getting a little bit more confident in Unreal. But I clearly feel way more confident in Blender still. Okay, decimating. I should have fast forwarded this even more. I think in general, like the whole process took me about 10 hours. And I fast forwarded down to roughly 1 hour. So it's like 1/10 of the original speed that I had. But yeah, everything done from scratch. And this is also going to kickstart the next image for this idea. If I'd want to, let's say, create a second or third frame, like it already sketched out at the beginning, these are going to take way less time. But like I said, if I want to create a new scene just in the same universe, I have those assets already. And also general assets like the floor tiling. You can just copy into another blend file, into a general kitbash blend file, and just reuse that in other projects. And over time, you easily create like a big library of assets that you can reuse. It's like brushes in a way. And the cool thing also is, if you really clean them up, or at least if you give a disclaimer that they aren't production ready or whatever, you could also just sell them, right? And have like a passive income, which is also nice. But I'm too lazy to clean them up. And I don't feel like, I'm not sure. Maybe one day I will give them away. But I'm not sure what I could even charge for this kind of, for these kind of assets. I'm not even sure. Like they have value for me, but I don't feel like they could possibly have value for anybody else. Yeah, but that's the power of 3D. Also a good side effect for 3D, you can give it to the client, and they, if not yourself, can bring it into Unreal or their game engine of choice, and just use the scenery that you've built as a starting point for level design, for looking at how it could, if it could work in the game itself, if the size, the dimensions are working. If you just have a 2D painting, you can show a really good idea, and it's most of the time are going to be faster. And also, what I did there, I feel like I have some repetition in the video. Okay, I'm sorry. Just listen to me. What did I say? 2D image, yeah. You have like an idea, you can create cooler designs, I feel like, just starting in 3D. But I feel if you know 3D and if you create a scene in 3D and assets, it's more value to the client, or it can be more value. Like it's depending on what the client is searching for. I don't want to bash on 2D stuff. I feel like that's something that I never really clicked with me, how to create 2D images. I'm too bad for that, I feel like. So I'm jealous of all those people who can draw and paint and those insanely cool things. And I'm trying to justify it to myself that I'm not using it because it's better for production. That's just my way of pretending. Yeah. So, but what I wanted to say is 3D is nice as a follow-up of your concept. It's more after just concepting that can be used to jumpstart the production. Okay, now we are going into textures. So I'm not going too deep into various texturing. Just in general, we have like generated UV, or like we have how's it called? I think triplanar projection, where you don't use UVs, but it's projecting textures from each side, from X, Y, Z side onto your model, or you can create UVs. And it really, really depends on how I feel. It's not necessarily what I think it's better. It's more like, do I feel today using UVs or not? I don't see a benefit in any of those. I couldn't say like one is better than the other. In this case, I did not create UVs. And I think for the stone and for the tree, I'm just using like 2 images. And you can just rewind the video and pause wherever you like to see the node trees. Because I just use one texture and use that one diffuse texture, this one base color texture, also as a roughness map, also as a bump map, which makes it easier for me to change stuff. It lets me be more creative in just changing the textures quickly, adjusting color, adjusting contrast. But it also helps with the performance of Blender, because the more textures, specifically the more high-res textures you have in any 3D software, the slower it gets, because textures are the most, or are the worst, or like big textures are the worst thing for any 3D software, because it's just so much data they have to run through. It's always better to have less textures or texture memory. So yeah, just using one texture, changing stuff here, using some noise textures to get details into it. I have this image of a tree bark on the left, just a reference for color. And yeah, just trying to get the vibe of that tree bark. And because of those eyes and because of how I sculpted the tree, it feels more like tentacles and like some kind of blob. And I'm really trying to fight that feeling with the texture. Cool. And now only the eyes are missing. And what I did is I had the nice idea to sculpt the eye. And I just saw a story of an amazing 3D artist. I think his name is Jared. Unfortunately, I can't remember his last name. Let me see if I see it on Instagram. But let me see. Is it here? No. But doesn't matter. I saw a reel on Instagram where he sculpted the eye and then just had the lens in front of it, like it's 2 different meshes, and I felt like, damn, that's looking cool what he did. Also the texturing he did in Substance Painter. I wanted to keep it a little bit more easy, but still I sculpted the eye, and again, creative freedom, right? I created a few more holds, made it a little bit more special, more interesting. And then I jump into 2D, into okay, his name is Jared Javis. He has a lot of followers on Instagram. You should follow him, Jared Javis. Okay, and for texturing, I'm just jumping into Photoshop, and let's see if I'm doing it. And I'm looking for a good photo of an eye on the internet, and just painted over it and adjusted it and made it so it suits the 3D model. So let's see. Am I doing anything here? Okay, it feels like the Blender is overlaying my Photoshop. Damn it. I'm super sorry. But still, I'll try to explain what I did. Like I downloaded the eye image, I painted over it. I used a screenshot of the eye of exactly this perspective as an overlay as well to know where all my cuts are. And now I'm reprojecting it back onto the eye to roughly match it, right? And now back into the whole scenery with all the lights and everything. It feels, at least for me, I was very, very positively surprised. It feels so good and natural. And now it's just like a quick instancing trick to just bring it to all the other eyeballs. And then I had the idea of maybe I could animate those eyes. It would add to the creepiness. Maybe in another project, maybe I'm going to do that, because I feel like it should move, and it's going to add a lot to the creepy idea that I had for the concept. But in this case, I scrapped it because I was recording, because I wanted to have like this done image. And then what is happening? Where's my scenery? I think there's some kind of recording problem right now here. Somehow it just grabbed the wrong windows, the wrong Blender window in the beginning. Still, at least we can see it right now. So this is a new Blender scene, right? I've created a new Blender file where I just copied over all the assets, and now I'm building the scenery. I have my references on another monitor along with my sketches, and I'm roughly trying to match my first sketch, number 1. But as you can see, there are a few ideas from the other sketches that I've added to this scene, like how the tree is growing inside that structure, and just slowly, because it's too big already, it's going out of it. There's no space in between. Now I need this round structure, right? So I'm using a few deform modifiers in Blender to curve it a little bit. Then I realize, okay, I don't need as many copies because we just can see the front. So I just stop at the middle of copying it. And you see, like, slowly everything is coming together. It's a fairly easy scene because we don't have too many stuff in the background. It's very straightforward, and I can copy a lot of stuff. And yeah, you can see what I'm doing right now. Expanding the stairs so I can have some kind of podest, so I can make it a little bit more important in the image. Where the tree is sitting on, now disguising those holes with the pillars I've created. Copying. We can see my poly count stays the same even though I'm copying stuff, because I'm using instances instead of duplicating stuff. And that's also a cool thing, because I've already did all the work with creating the textures and decimating everything. it's very responsive, as well as just turning on my standard lighting scenario makes it look okay-ish at least. And this way I stay motivated. I don't feel like, damn, I have so much work to do. No, it's already working. Now it's just creative vision. Now it's like what I'm doing right now, painting a little bit of dirt everywhere, right? Changing the mood by changing the lighting. I want to have like this sunset eclipse dark feeling. So I'm trying out stuff there. I have my fog volume, which is always there. I'm just in love with fog. I feel like every artist has this love, this fog love. And I'm always trying to battle my desire for the fake Blade Runner fog against being able to show enough stuff so it's readable for the viewer. But if it was just for me, I would just put on fog all the time, so we just have shapes, no surface detail at all, and it would be awesome for me. Yeah, okay, so trying out lights, right? This looks very artificial, so I'm going to change that later. But you can see now I'm using the trees to add a little bit of foreground elements to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm trying to have very big foreground element, and also I want to have some kind of blurriness in the foreground to mimic a nice cinematic lens. But I think in the end I scratched that. Now I'm creating a new sphere to sculpt over it, to have that top part of the tree, because the tree is growing outside of the top, of course, like I had in my concept sketch, and it's missing. So I'm just creating that base shape, like in VR, and then I'm using the other assets to break up that shape, to just make it more detailed, more interesting to look at. Then I'm going to copy the textures on top of it. I don't know why I'm pausing right now. I think maybe the doorbell ring, something like that. But yeah, I think that's the one thing I've sculpted in Blender. And that's also good if you feel comfortable in using different softwares. Because at least for me, I feel super, super confident when I'm missing something that I can easily create it in the fastest way possible in any software. I don't have to jump back into VR and build this top section of the tree. No, I can just do it in my scene in Blender on the fly. And I think that's super important, to be able to work fast, to try out ideas also. Like in this case, I felt like, oh, it doesn't look like a tree. Like what can give a feeling of tree? Maybe some branches, right? But I want to not only feel different from a normal tree, but also I want to keep the language of my other trees, of those stumpy trees in the foreground. So I'm just using them and just stretching them as branches. Now placing my character, replacing my camera a little bit to make it more epic. The composition was already thought out in my sketching phase, so there's not that much thinking involved. Now I feel like, okay, I don't want to have just eyes in the front, I want eyes everywhere. So it feels really like the AllSeeingTree, right? It has eyes everywhere, so it can see everything. I put them here and there, and I use the roots to break up the ground a little bit more, to make it more interesting, and also to give a little bit more of lines in my image to lead the way into and towards the main subject matter, which is in the center in this case. And I personally love my centered compositions. You can see like I've copied a few eyes. On the left upper side there is something floating around, but I don't care because I can paint that out easily. So even though I'm in Blender, in 3D, and my textures and my models are quite on a very solid finished level, I don't care if there is something not working at the moment, because I'm always planning to paint over it if I don't animate. And when I plan to paint over something, I feel like every mistake can be solved in 2D. Also, I feel like just painting over stuff and makes it even more personal, makes it even less 3D. And that's going to be the goal later in 2D. Painting over my 3D scene always has the goal to get rid of that super 3D look. If I have enough time, I would spend a lot of time just painting over it and get rid of the 3D feeling to a point that I hope people can't say if I've used 3D or not, at least from a technical point of view, because there's not much 3D looking stuff in there. But yeah. So you see what I'm doing now. I'm stretching everything out over my monitor because I normally don't render. I'm just let the viewport render a little bit, and then I'm going to create a screenshot and use that screenshot and start painting over it, because I'm lazy and because I feel when I'm rendering stuff, sometimes it doesn't look exactly like my viewport, and then I'm a little bit demoralized. And this way I am I can be 100% sure that what I see is what I get. But yeah, my screen size is 4K. So I started 4K. I just uprise it to 6,500 pixels wide in Photoshop. And yeah, in the beginning, using the camera adjustments to change the color a little bit. And then I'm going to start painting. And the idea is to separate shapes a little bit more, to make the image clearer, to get rid of the 3D look, to add even more atmosphere, and to change those parts that were missing in 3D. For example, my character in the foreground, I want to have some kind of kid with a yellow cape, and this is going to be something that I'm doing in Photoshop. But yeah, as you can see, just using selections to create more separations, to simplify forms, to have sharp edges versus soft edges, to bring in a little bit more color variation and introducing more grays or colored parts that aren't really in 3D yet. Yeah, adding more details, more smaller paint strokes like those branches to really give it that feeling of a tree, because now I feel it's starting to feel like a tree. Before that it didn't feel like a tree, but now those branches are adding so much. So yeah, it's always good to know your weaknesses and your strong sides, so you can use whichever side in the process to get to your finished desired concept. Cool. So I hope this was a good and informative voiceover. Everybody who made it through, thank you so much. I think it's super fun just to see what I've created, to talk over it. And maybe I'm going to do something like that again in the future, maybe more sooner than later. But I think I've learned a lot just looking at it and seeing like mistakes that I did. Personally, for example, I feel like even in the end, it's still way too 3D to me. I'm always having like those post-process last adjustment layers in the end that you can see. So maybe at the end you just slow down the video and look at these settings, because I'm adding some kind of blur, noise, chromatic aberration, stuff like that, to get even more rid of the 3D look and give it a little bit more filmic movie style look. But yeah, maybe in another video I'm going to explain it a little bit more in depth. But again, thank you so much guys for watching. And I'd really love to know if you enjoyed this. Maybe leave a comment. Maybe it would be better to leave a comment on my ArtStation, because I'm just uploading it to YouTube because of the platform, not because I'm there all the time. So it would be great to know your feedback. But if you don't have ArtStation, or you could follow me on Instagram. But if you don't have those two, just leave it on YouTube. There will be a day where I'll look at the comments, and if there are some friendly, nice comments there, I certainly will be very happy to read them and answer them. All right, 1 minute left. Last adjustments. As you can see, some curves, some tricks, like having a brush with a lot of color dynamics to make the image have a more richer color palette. Adding last minute foreground element, adding a little bit more detail on the child in the foreground. Yeah, more separation. Cool. Okay. Noise, everything. Soon. Oh yeah, I have some just random image as an overlay to add even more color into the image, and fade out to my final concept. So thank you again, guys. Hope to talk to you soon, and all the best to you. Bye bye.